How many coaches will lose their jobs over Trevor Lawrence and the Trevor Lawrence problem in Jacksonville? So the Jaguars, Trevor Lawrence, all of that, really just the Jags in general, over the last 15 years have been, maybe even longer than that, have been absolutely terrible. And they've gone through a multitude, 3 top 10 draft-picked quarterbacks, and Blake Bortles 3rd overall, Blaine Gabbert 10th overall, and Trevor Lawrence 1st overall, none of which solved the issue. Now, the one problem with Trevor Lawrence is that he now has a $300 million or a $275 million contract. And he is paid as if he is a generational quarterback when he has been anything but. He's been closer to a draft bust than he has been to a generational quarterback. So we're going to talk a little bit about that. And a little bit about the issue in the NFL now of teams paying quarterbacks very quickly. And we see it a lot where, Justin Herbert and Trevor Lawrence and Dak Prescott, and it's just no ifs, ands, or buts about it. Raise the bar, give them more money than anybody else, and we'll just keep it moving. And I think we're at the point now to where teams are going to start saying, you know what, we're actually going to need a little bit more performance from our quarterbacks before we give them these huge deals. They can't just be franchise quarterbacks because we drafted them highly.
They signed Trevor Lawrence to one of those elite, all-time great, can't possibly lose him, reason that you win kind of quarterback contracts like, I don't know, checks notes 15 minutes ago, right? They just signed him to that. He looks broken. He looks terrible. It's unbelievable how bad that team is. Now, I don't know if we should count Urban Meyer because he was such a disaster. But if you're going to start putting the over-under at number of coaches that are going to get fired while Trevor Lawrence is the starting quarterback at Jacksonville, it's going to be 2 any minute now, right? I mean, Doug Peterson's going to get fired. And
yeah, I mean, he's not going to get fired. Jacksonville's about to go to London for 2 weeks, so they're not going to fire Peterson before that. So I would assume probably a little after London, if Jacksonville doesn't figure things out, which is hard to imagine they do at this point, then yeah, he probably will get fired.
Reporters after the game hilariously are asking, he's talking about how, I have to take a look at the film and see if anyone needs to be benched. And someone actually asked the question, does that include the quarterback? That should have come with a laugh track. If Doug Peterson tried to bench Trevor Lawrence, Doug Peterson would get fired that minute and deserve.
Well, that's the problem. So in that lies the problem, where you have a quarterback like Trevor Lawrence who has not done anything. Like, let's look at the stats. So we look at Trevor Lawrence, and this is compared to Baker Mayfield, Daniel Jones, and Sam Darnold. I tried to balance out. It's actually kind of surprising because, so if you look at the criteria, I try to balance out the games pretty close. But as you can see, like, this is not counting Sam Darnold's best season of right now. This is not counting Baker Mayfield's last 3 seasons, which are probably the best stretch of his career. This is just from year 1 to where it could balance out with the games played. So looking at these results, like if you take a look at them right now, pretend these are all being weighted equally, these players. You can make a case for any of these guys, like kind of being better than the other guy. But you can't make a case that Trevor Lawrence is leaps and bounds better than any of these other guys. You certainly can't make the case that these guys should be cut, but one of them should be paid $275 million. So now this is 4 games. So Trevor, before this season, was 20-30. Now he's 20-34. So you can kind of just, it's skewed a little bit by 4 games there. But before this season, Trevor Lawrence is 20-30. The stats are not that impressive. I mean, if you take out the statistics from this season, which we can do. So if we go in here, let's just take out this season, get the results. So look at Trevor Lawrence. I mean, you're talking about 20-30, passing yards, 11,000, 235 yards passing a game, touchdown interception ratio 58-39. Kind of just average, kind of just right around average. Nothing special. In itself, this isn't that big of a problem because a lot of teams have kind of average, kind of not so special quarterbacks. But when you decide that it's more important to appease your fan base and push this narrative of we have our franchise guy, we are relevant because we have our franchise guy. Please sell his or buy his jersey. Please watch our games. Please buy season tickets. Please buy his merchandise. Look, he's got cool long hair. He looks like a quarterback. He walks like a quarterback. Problem is, he's just a worse version of Baker Mayfield. Problem is, he's just kind of Sam Darnold. Problem is, he's arguably worse than Daniel Jones. Okay, and when you put that price tag on him, all of a sudden of $275 million, it makes it to where you can't, as long as he is average, you can't really advance the team because you can't bench him. You can't. And then every coach has to succeed, and if he doesn't succeed, you got to get rid of the coach because you can't get rid of the quarterback. And the roster gets stagnant because then the roster can't change. Because you bring in a new coach, hey, you got to make Trevor Lawrence work. Oop, he's not making Trevor Lawrence work. Get him out. It becomes more important to make the quarterback work than to make the team work. Now, the Jaguars, make no ifs, ands, or buts about it. The Jaguars have been a horrible franchise. Or you could really argue that they're the worst franchise in just over a long period of time in the NFL. When you look at, again, the Gabberts, the Bortles, even Trayvon Walker, how I mentioned this, I think last year, is Trayvon Walker the least mentioned number 1 overall pick of all time? No one talks about him. Nobody. He's like Anthony Bennett in the NBA. Like for a while there, people were like, what's going on with Anthony Bennett? Why, maybe he's a bust. And then he was so irrelevant, no one even talks about him. Like when you hear about these like all-time bust, you ever hear anybody mention Trayvon Walker? Ever? No. I don't think most people even know who he is. The fact that he was the first overall pick, that is crazy. No one mentions that he's a bust. No one mentions that, he's this or he's that. No one even knows what he's doing out there. Okay? So the Jaguars have a lot of problems, but certainly a $275 million problem is Trevor Lawrence.
Deserve to be. Doug Peterson is the coach of Jacksonville because his job is to make Trevor Lawrence great. If he can't do that, then they will fire him long before they will bench Trevor Lawrence.
Yeah. You did the draft in which Trevor Lawrence went 1-1.
That was my first one.
Okay. You tell me if I'm overdoing it, but this was a quarterback that was compared, if not favorably, to people like Andrew Luck,
Elway,
Peyton Manning. Like
those
that
guys,
that was the company.
Better prospect than Peyton.
See, that's the problem too, is because you ever watch the Weather Channel? I don't know if y'all are, if you're watching this channel and you're around like a hurricane region. I've always lived in a region of the Gulf Coast where hurricanes are a real thing. On the Weather Channel, every hurricane is the most devastating, scariest hurricane that ever existed. Everyone, if you watch just the Weather Channel. Because they have to do that. Like, I'm not saying they're nefarious, but the Weather Channel is never going to come out there and say, hey guys, this storm's probably nothing. Go ahead and change the channel. They're not going to do that. The NFL, once the draft became arguably the second biggest event in the NFL, like obviously Super Bowl, the regular season is like number 1, but the NFL draft was turned into an enormous event. It used to just be kind of a thing happening in the shadows and people with phones, in a room, whatever. People barely paid attention to it. Now it is a huge part of the year for the NFL calendar. As soon as that happened, and as soon as Mel Kiper became a thing, and as soon as all these other draft experts become a thing, every prospect is a generational prospect. Every first overall pick is a future Hall of Famer. Every quarterback, from the Johnny Manziels to the Sam Darnolds to the Mark Sanchez to the Trevor Lawrence to the Justin Fields to anyone, to the Trey Lances, to any quarterback taken is the next franchise guy, is the Hall of Fame guy, is being compared to John Elway and Brett Favre and Peyton Manning and Tom Brady and whoever. Because they have to be, right? They have to be. We watch these guys play great in college. A lot of them won national championships or awards or Heismans or whatever. And just on the shallow level, why would you say they're not going to be good, right? Why would you say like, oh yeah, Trevor Lawrence, who was great in college, beat Alabama, won national championships at Clemson. Why wouldn't he be good in the NFL? Got long hair. Yeah. And so he's quickly compared to other first overall quarterbacks. And then the comps happen. And so there's also this narrative that at ESPN or whoever is propped up with all these players. So you have that narrative coming in. You've got the highly drafted guy. You got the fan base who believes we have our franchise guy. They're appeased in the franchise. They're bought into the franchise. They're excited about the franchise. If you don't believe me, go ask Washington right now. Go ask the Commanders. How bought in is that fan base to that franchise right now? They weren't as bought in whenever Jaden Daniels was kicking 7 field goals against the Giants. They weren't as bought in when Jaden Daniels was getting rolled against the Buccaneers and looked terrible. Okay, but they're bought in now because they believe they have their guy now. Now go ask Robert Griffin how fast that can go away. Okay, when a fan base believes they have their franchise guy, their quarterback, their whatever, they're in. The team is hot. They're relevant. They're everywhere. So as you can see, all these different narratives that have nothing to do with on the field, has nothing to do with the player's actual capabilities. Again, no one's talking about Jaden Daniels against Washington or against the Giants. No one's talking about Jaden Daniels against the Buccaneers. They're talking about right now, the hot story, the hot narrative. Is Jaden Daniels, we're already hearing it. We're already hearing the Jaden Daniels should have been taken over Caleb Williams. We're already hearing that is Jaden Daniels the best prospect in however many years. I was just listening to a podcast where a guy said that the Commanders should not trade Jaden Daniels for Caleb Williams and like 2 first-round picks. Okay, so it's already getting there. So we have all these narratives that have nothing to do with actual efficiency levels, on-field play, any of that stuff. Win-loss record. It's just these crazy narratives boosting up all these players from all these different areas. Like ESPN needs it. The team needs it. The agents need it. Everyone needs it, even though it's not actually positively impacting the field. And that's how you get Trevor Lawrence, who everyone needs to be great. Everyone benefits from him being great, but he actually isn't great. So the one that is really negatively impacted by all of this is the team he's playing for.
So Mel would tell you that the greatest prospects he ever saw in college, his top of the top of the top of the top are Elway and Luck. Absolutely, Trevor Lawrence is put in that category.
Then how is this explicable in any way? How is it? It was easy enough to cast away his rookie season because of the Urban Meyer of it all, and I think almost everyone gave him a pass. Very next year, they're in the second round of the playoffs. He has that huge comeback against the Chargers and looked great, looked like he was ascending. He was a popular MVP pick the following year. This is a team that's now lost 8 consecutive games in which he has started, and he looks totally lost. Like you said, the ink is still wet. It's $55 million a year. Trevor Lawrence can't be average. He can't even be good. Trevor Lawrence has to be great to.
Yeah, he has to be like MVP level, generational level, Hall of Fame level to make that contract worth it at all.
Justify that contract. And right now, he's barely playable.
Why?
Yeah.
Like, someone help me. Cam, are you watching these games? Like, why is he so bad?
He has not been good. Or I'll take that back. He has not been at any point what they think, what the contract says he is. At his best, let's take a look at the year. This is Trevor Lawrence's big year that they keep talking about. The team goes 9-8. Okay. He has a 66% completion percentage, 4,100 yards, 25 touchdowns, 8 interceptions. There you go. That's his MVP year that they're talking about. Look at some other players. Baker Mayfield last year, 64%, 4,000 yards, 28-10. Team goes 9-8. Derek Carr last year. Derek Carr, 68% completion percentage, 3,900 yards, 25-8. Team goes 9-8. Like this year, this Trevor Lawrence year, that is the MVP ascension year. We saw from Baker Mayfield last year. We saw from Derek Carr last year for the most part. And on the heels of that, a year that, again, Baker had, Carr had, on the heels of that, you get $275 million. So the idea of like, what happened to this insanely good player? What happened to this great player? I would say nothing happened to this great player. I would say he's kind of just the same. He had more picks last year. He had 6 more interceptions, but completion percentage, about the same. Yards, about the same. Touchdowns, about the same. Team, About the same. Went 9-8, went 8-8. Kind of the same. Like, when you look at it like that, nothing's happened. You know, like, even rushing. His unreal year, 291 yards, 5 touchdowns. Last year, 339, 4 touchdowns. So, it's not that anything changed. It's not that he's broken. It's that he's kind of just doing this. In his career, 20-30, losing quarterback. Yards in attempt, 6.7. Yards per game, 235. Touchdown interception, 58-39. Just kind of who he is. Just kind of what he has been. It's what you bought. What you bought for $275 million. So the question shouldn't be, what's wrong with Trevor Lawrence? The question should be, what's wrong with the NFL? What's wrong with the team building, the front offices, where they are running to pay these quarterbacks? Jordan Love, another one. Jordan Love may end up being really good. But if you take the first half of what we've seen so far with Jordan Love, and if you split his career, you take the first half of what we've seen, back half of what we've seen, you got kind of an average quarterback. You take that back half of last year's snapshot, you might have the best quarterback in the NFL. And teams are rushing to pay when they don't have to. Jalen Hurts, same thing. Jalen Hurts, we saw that run up to the Super Bowl. Damn, he's really good. Everything else, damn, he's not very good at all. The teams are not allowing themselves to find out who these quarterbacks truly are. They're not allowing themselves time to do that. They're just rushing out and paying because they want to lock in that fan base. They want to lock in appeasing their fan base. They want to lock in this narrative that, look, we're doing all we can. We got the franchise quarterback after year one in New England. I'm surprised they didn't build a statue of Mac Jones. After year one in New England, all the articles, New England found their next Tom Brady. How did New England do this again? Mac Jones, best quarterback in the draft. Just like that. He's not only benched, he's off the team.
There's no earth. I picked them last night because I said the Jaguars aren't a bad enough team to start out 0-3. Lawrence isn't a bad enough player to start out this bad. Buffalo is due for a bad game somewhere. I genuinely thought the Jaguars, that was not just my heart talking. I genuinely thought Jacksonville had a chance. That game was over early in the second quarter. Why is he so bad?
It's so weird because everything suggested after his second season that the arrow was pointed right upwards, right?
Absolutely.
He won a playoff game. Yes, he threw 4 picks in the first half of it, won a playoff game, and came as close to beating the Chiefs as anyone did that playoffs. And since then, since halfway through last season, when they collapsed, he has not won a game. So I can't really explain it. And especially when every evidence we had up until about week 12 of last season suggested he was on track to be one of the best quarterbacks in the NFL, which he looked like for parts of the last 2 seasons. So I don't.
Not true. I mean, some of that was true. But he almost had it when he said he won that playoff game even though he threw 4 picks in the first half. So the Chargers collapse. Brandon Staley being Brandon Staley somehow masks the fact that Trevor Lawrence threw 4 interceptions in the first half in a playoff game. And they come out of there with a crazy come-from-behind win. All that's masked. If Brandon Staley doesn't go full Brandon Staley and Trevor Lawrence throws 4 picks and a loss in the playoffs, does he get that $275 million contract? I don't know. And like this guy said, everything we saw showed that he was trending upwards. Not really. Everything we saw was just kind of the same. Even that year with the playoff game. He finishes with a 4 interception playoff game. But because of the weird circumstances around the comeback, all that's forgotten, and it's just he won a playoff game. The Jaguars won a playoff game. We're back. The Jags are back. He's the guy.
Get it right now.
The way he won that playoff game was it was the best 4 interception playoff game of all time.
It was a 27-point comeback.
That he came back from that deficit. Again, I mean, so many things happened that night. The fact that the Chargers didn't fire their coach after that game, I'll still never understand. But whatever, it worked out well because they got Harbaugh in the deal a year later. But that's the one I'd be really worried about.
I mean, right now, that game, that night that you just described, looks like the zenith of this kid's career. Whereas we thought that was going to be the beginning of something special. Very confounding considering the talent.
Now, I think he's not yet 25 years old. So there's plenty of time for that thing to get turned around. But boy, right now it is hanging in the balance.
Yeah, I mean, here's a word to the wise for these teams. Word to the wise is you don't have to rush and pay these quarterbacks. Let them play out a little bit of those contracts. Like, let them play out a little bit of these rookie deals or restructure into, not a $300 million deal. And these teams cannot be afraid to see a player, understand that it ain't it, and get out of there. There's too many teams that are sticking around with bad quarterbacks, and it just doesn't work. It doesn't matter. Like, the Cleveland Browns right now are being the entire franchise is being tanked by the situation around Deshaun Watson. Because Watson's bad, but you got to play him. You can't build around him because he's $300 million. You lost draft picks because of the trade. Like, his play on the field is the least of your worries, the least of your concern, right? So, but another thing too, I have a theory where we're seeing this new too high shell kind of like don't allow quarterbacks to beat you deep kind of defenses. It's not surprising to me that the quarterbacks that are successful right now are more of the take what the defense gives you, the efficient quarterbacks who can kind of read a defense, not trying to do too much, and not afraid to take a 6-yard reception. Joe Flacco last year, we're seeing it this year where Flacco comes in, looks pretty good. Darnold playing pretty well because he's not being asked to do too much. The Brock Purdy's of the world. And that's a stark difference from a lot of these quarterbacks like Trevor Lawrence, who were asked for so long, win the game, do a lot, improvise, bomb the ball deep shots. And all of a sudden that's gone. All of a sudden that's not a thing anymore. So like Anthony Richardson's another good example where he can throw it 80 yards or whatever. He's got an insane athletic profile. But right now the game is asking him to do something very different. The game is asking him to play like Joe Flacco and just sit in the pocket, read a defense, make a quick read, get rid of the ball, take 5 yards. See you later. So you got this whole crop of athletes and this whole crop of quarterbacks who are like, damn, this whole time I thought what we had to do was just like spread it out, air raid, bomb the ball deep, like what Josh Allen was doing, basically, what Patrick Mahomes was doing 3, 4, 5 years ago. That's different now. Now you want the Brock Purdy. Now you want the Joe Flacco. Now you want the efficient, safe, intermediate to short route player. So now even more of a reason not to have a $300 million quarterback. Well, you can go get Joe Flacco for free. When you can go get a lot of these Sam Darnold for free, Baker Mayfield for free. A lot of these quarterbacks are just out there because they're boring and there's nothing to them. But right now, boring is kind of in when it comes to the quarterbacks. All right, ladies and gentlemen, let me know in the comments below what do you think about this as far as Trevor Lawrence, as far as the Jaguars, as far as this change in the NFL structure. Do you think this will impact how the NFL looks at quarterback contracts? Or do you think Trevor Lawrence still has some time and he can still be really, really good? Let me know. Thank you for watching. I'll see you in the next